So should we start, Alberto?
Yeah, sure. So,
okay.
Oh, wait, one more person. Okay.
So we're Sara and Alberto, and I think you already met us. We were having two different groups, but we are all together today. We've been working with Eva for quite many years now, and I think I see so many familiar faces. So you know Eva very well too, some of you don't, and you'll get to know her better. This week we are going to be holding the Zoom session, Alberto and myself, but Eva is watching all the videos that you've sent, either because you've CC her in or because we've been forwarding them to her, and she will be contacting you personally and giving you individual feedback, advising you on the work you're doing and everything. So no worries that she's not here today, because she's still like watching every single video, and she's going to be contacting you as well individually. So on the first session of today, we have like different questions that we would like to discuss as small groups. So later on, we'll be sending you to different like small meeting rooms where you will be like around 4 or 5 people, and you could discuss the question. We will come back and share the discussion that you had, and then we'll go into a different group and do the same with another few questions. Every time we divide you in groups, you will have to choose one leader or one person that takes care of writing down your opinions or your discussions. So when we come back as a whole, you can share those group decisions or group comments. So it will be easier to have a little bit more of order and clarity in what the group shares. Alberto,
just to hear everyone's experience. Wait, sorry, what?
Would you like to add something else?
No, is that clear for everyone? Thumbs up if that was clear. Okay, so I'm gonna, how many are we? 45. So I'm gonna try to break everyone up into a group, and you'll have 15 minutes. Do a small introduction on yourself, your name, where you're from, and what you do related to dance, if that's okay.
We're gonna change the group every time, so we keep on meeting as many people as possible. I think it's very nice that you share the relation you have with movement or with dance itself. So this way we will share the variety and the different approaches that we can have in this group of people. Should I share the first question? Anyway, it's going to be typed on the chat group for everyone.
Yeah, everyone can enter the chat, right? I don't know. Yeah, okay, so I'll be putting the first question there, and Sara can read it out loud.
Yeah, so for the first task, since we had 2 tasks, no, the first one was to describe with your movement and with different qualities an object, and the second task was to travel, to move this object in space from one side to the other of the room. The first question goes directed to the first task, so the task of describing the object. And the question is, what type of qualities did this exercise offer to your movement? For example, if the movement was more or less precise, more or less articulated, concrete. So any qualities that you think the movement or the task number 1 offered to your movement.
Welcome back, everyone. I hope that was a nice group session you guys had. So let's start this conversation. So, okay, we had room 1 with Bernard, Brianne, Bling Bling, Amelia, and Stella. If whoever was the group leader, can they come forward? I don't know where they are.
Hi, yeah, I'm Brianne. Yeah, so we kind of all led it. So we all talked about it. I just took notes. I'm Brianne from the United States, but I live in Brussels now. So yeah, we had some really good kind of talks about the movement that we did, kind of what inspired how we transitioned from a physical like subject, like we had a box, a book, a lamp, a TV, so all very like geometric shapes, and kind of trying to improve from that of just making like your body a square or your body a circle, to kind of adjust it into a movement that's standing. So something physically moving, and then something like actually moving across the space. And we talked about, like, I had a book. We talked about maybe the physicalness of not having just the square edges or the brim, but having the pages folding, and as a contemporary dancer, maybe wanting to make it more fluid. So thinking of the pages as opposed to the hardness of it, kind of like moving back and forth. We talked about it not necessarily being the reality, but the object coming with you. We talked about the, sorry, I'm reading my notes. We also talked about kind of maybe even combining. So someone had a box, but then they wanted to make it more movement. So they added a ball into it, and that helped them create something in the end was still a box, was still their subject matter, but making a dance from it. And finding what their background in dance was at the beginning was nice, because almost that kind of inspired what you picked, and it inspired what you placed on your body in the end. So using the edges or using the corners, you had more dynamic and precise movement, versus the pages of a book were more contemporary, fluid, and soft. So yeah.
Nice. So can you repeat one last time? What was your group's object?
So we had a book, a TV, a box, ball, and a lamp.
Nice. Cool. Did everyone hear that properly? Yeah. Thank you for sharing, Brianne. All right, so should we go to room 2? Which was with Ale, Chung, Francisca, and Clara. Who was the group leader in this?
Me.
room?
Well, after each one share the experience, like we concluded it was interesting how each one understand the task. Now, first I understand it more like in the space, visual in the space. And by example, Clara use a curtain, and she takes characteristics of the object to create movement. Chung, she couldn't do it, but we talk about the breaking habits of task and those things. And also with Francisca, she shared that she was like jumping between objects in mind. And well, that's why we talk that each one take it like different. Yeah, we also struggling with the stocks in our mind to create, and how can we break it? I think that's it.
Nice, thank you for sharing. And from room 3, which was with Greta, India, Jess, and Tushas. So the group leader, they can come forward.
Hi, we didn't really have a group leader. We just kind of spoke together. We took quite a long time with our introductions to each other. So we didn't spend as long as we hoped on our tasks and movement, but we did manage to get a few notes. So Greta had mentioned that even though it wasn't planned, she found that her movement qualities went through like softness and indulgent, as opposed to her other task. And to share, I hope I've said it right. He said his was very grounded, relaxed, precise, and yet not edgy. And I'd say my movement varied from openness and linear. and precise. And I think that's as far as our notes had got to.
Nice. All right, now we're going to room 4, which was with Yeva, Jonathan, Rosella, and Krista.
Yeah, hi.
Hello.
So I'm taking note of everything. We went through quite a lot of stuff actually. The presentations were quite quick. And we first started talking about, or I mentioned how we can be limited by the shapes themselves. And we chose different shapes that could be very simple. I chose a cone, for example, but Crystal chose a round table, and also how some of us chose to see it more in our use from the image in our mind, and how we could also use it from actually looking around and seeing into the space what we have. And then we moved on also into the context and how our different experiences will change the way we approach the tasks. Like I'm in current training now and have been a lot with school, like a lot of hours a day. And we have people who might have an injury and are more watching, and more people who are in and out and have been affected by COVID, etc., and stuff like that. So the approach is definitely different and gives you a different perspective on things, which is really important, and gives nuances into the way we move. And then we also discussed how it's not only the shape itself, but it can also be the use of it, as previously mentioned by other people, the characteristics and stuff like that. And then we moved on and asked ourselves why we chose the shape. And we also saw that circles is very reoccurring in the movement. The things that we had were a cone, a rounding table, and a frying pan, which all have sort of rounding edges or a complete round shape at the bottom or the top. And it could be related into our anatomy in the body, with the joints being very circular in itself, and how circles is probably a very natural approach to our body because, well, yeah, it's in our body in itself and it makes it easier to move. So choosing something that's very triangular or just has sharp corners could be harder, but it's not exclusively. But for us, the circles were very easy, or not very easy, but was an easier approach or something that came natural, or just was reoccurring. And then we finally went into our different experiences from just finding the image, the first task, and then put it into the traveling, which was different in itself. We spent a lot of time, at least me and Crystal, on just finding the shape, and it realized that we're taking a lot of time to figure it out how we would feel in the body, and it was quite hard to find a very genuine way, at least for me. And then we had a different experience to traveling. For me, it was easy traveling, and for somebody else, harder to put the object into a traveling motion. But yeah, that's all we went through. Quite a lot.
Nice, thank you for sharing. All right, and we're going to go into room 5, which was with Cristiana, Stephanie, and Vanessa.
Yeah, I took the notes. So in our group, we also talked about 2 really different approaches we had. One was also kind of more of an object, a pyramid, which led to the movement being really precise, concrete, trying to hit all the corners of this pyramid. And the other approach was really kind of different because it was about imagining an energetic object that's therefore really dynamic because of the energy, and at the same time important to the person, so it needs to be protected, and that led to the movement being really dynamic, as I already said, and heavy. So yeah, we talked about those 2, and that's it.
Nice, thanks for sharing. Now we're going on to room 6, and sorry if I pronounced this wrong. Correct me, I don't know. Ayaisa, Antita, Mercy, and Sarah.
So I was the one taking notes, and it emerged that all of us felt the movement less or more detailed and concrete, like it gave us a concrete quality of movement and clarity. So what else? Yeah, it was also specific and framed in a term of time. So it was like really set on time. And it was for, I don't know the name, I don't remember, but for one of us, it was challenging because she's not a contemporary dancer. So she was at first improvising, and she didn't feel like she had a wild vocabulary in contemporary dance. But then once she started the task, she found out natural material, like new material. So it was nice to have this task and to see how we didn't move as we were in our comfort zone, but we found out new way of moving, like that we never used before. So that was really nice. And yeah, so detail, specific, framed, concrete. And for I don't see her, but for another one of us, it was interesting to see, like she was drawing a table, but she saw herself moving like not how do you say, like in a strict, like really fixed way, but she was like going in spirals and circles. So she felt like she had to focus more on the task itself, like to see the table in the room and to really embody the object. And for me personally, it was nice to, like, I didn't use improvisation. I really want to, I don't know, for example, first I drew the perimeter of the object, which was a basket with a pillow inside. So I first wanted to really explore how to make the basket clear to myself. And then once I found out, like, okay, this is the basket, I moved to another level. So I moved to the pillow. And for example, I didn't only draw the perimeter, but I also tried to go into the pillow. So to experience the like the material itself. That's it.
Nice, thank you for sharing. And then we have room 7, which was Emilia, Gabrielle, Joe, and Chete.
I can share. No, sorry. So yeah, we said about, I guess we had different ways of approaching it. Like for myself, I decided a specific object. And then for some others, like Rachel, for example, I actually drew on a piece of paper, like a geometric design, and then had it in front of her and was using this. And the other was also an abstract design. So I guess, as someone else was saying, it was really personal, our perspectives, depending on like how we approach different things, like whether you're visualizing the object just as it is, or whether you also take elements of what this object brings to you, whether there's feelings, for example. We all said actually it was definitely easy to recognize yourself and like your own movement flow within creating that. I guess, which is like getting into a little bit of patterns of how we naturally move individually, but from this task, new dynamics were a thing we all said, and the new rhythm too, with the question of asking why, so why we are doing these specific movements rather than just flowing through a task or through improvisation. And then some other qualities were very specific and like direct in choices, clarity, and then taking time to stop and be present and actually thinking about where you are in a space and how you are sharing the subject, I guess. Yeah, that's everything.
Thanks for sharing. And now we're going to go into room 8, which is Andrea, Giovanna, Lucia, and Sarah.
Yes, hello. Well, one thing that we shared that conditionates a lot the movement apart from the objects is the space that we where we were dancing a lot. So yeah, for example, one of us, she was making a donut and dancing in a not so much big space, and she was focusing on round movements and making a rounded energy, and she felt she tried to make the shape of a donut, but she found to the like the drowning energy of the agujeros, the donut. And about putting it into traveling, she was it was very difficult for her because she felt their body like more edgy, so she found difficult in the traveling to maintain the donut energy. It was difficult for her. For another of us, she was thinking about a clock and dancing in a bigger space, and at first she was focusing on the shape of the clock, but in the traveling she found out that her mind was traveling more into the philosophical concept of the clock or another things that the clock mean to her. So she lost like the shape of the clock doing that. For another of us, she was dancing in a very big space. So she told us that for her, when she creates, the travel is already in her creation, and she was making circles with the parts of her body. So yeah, she already creates with traveling or with space in the room, not only in the static body. And she found she had to rethink the phrase because she felt more like improvising or creating. For me, I was doing a sheep with I was dancing in a small room. At first, they were like more concrete movements, and I tried to do the shape, and I knew where my body had to go to make it. To put it into the traveling was as I don't have so much space, it was like making circles or eights in the space. So I found out that the shapes of the sheep, they went fluid. And as I was doing circles, all the movements were more fluid, and I lost concreteness, I think. That's it.
Interesting. Thank you. And we're going to go into room 9, which is with Agnes, Katarina, Natalie, and Rosa.
Okay, I can share some thoughts. Well, the first thing that came into discussion was this that this type of task gives a clear direction, no, in the mind, like, okay, to not get lost, it's good to have this direction and to keep creating and not get lost into this improvisation that that it's hard to fix sometimes, no? But it's also challenging not to fall into the dictature of the task, no, and not to be too mental of what you're doing and like letting the dance appear. But personally, I thought that it was a really interesting task for me because it allows a lot of interpretation. So it's still a clear direction, but you can focus on the shapes or also like on the weight of the object, the texture, how it moves, how big or small it is. So for me, it was really good this because I didn't go too mental, like, okay, I have to do these shapes. And sometimes I went into, how it moves, or I am the object, like, so the object is inside and maybe it's outside. So for me, it created a lot of freedom, actually, inside this direction. No? And also some of the things mentioned was that the first task was a little bit more staccato and like fixed, and then when the traveling was coming, it became more continuous. So the dance appears a little bit more, and it was a little bit more free. This is what I understand the other people were saying. What else? Yeah, so it became more fluid, the movement with the traveling, and also this thing of the space, no, that we are limited. Some of the people, we have a limited space that we were working with, so it affects the movement, obviously. And one of the girls said there was a carpet on the floor, so the movement was conditioned by this as well. And so yeah, these external factors that also condition the thing. And I don't know what else to add. I think that's it.
Very good point. Thank you, Agnes, for sharing.
You.
All right, now we're going to go into room 10 with Aisha, Ina, Jenny, and Monia. Sorry if I mispronounced any names.
Okay, we didn't really pick a leader either, but I can share some things. Well, first of all, we were talking about how, like others have mentioned already, that having to think about a specific object made the movement, again, more like concrete and articulated. And for me, at least, it made it very specific. You had, like for me, I had to think about like, okay, the movement has to be this and not that, because otherwise it won't describe this specific object. Yeah, then we were also talking about how thinking about the object made you think about how the movement felt less, and you were just thinking about how it actually looks, not how it feels in your body to do what you're doing. Yeah, and also someone said that going from the stationary to the moving phrase, like going from point A to point B, helped in creating something, because at first it was challenging, and then going to the moving was easier. And then, well, one more point was that, well, I actually said that it would be interesting to watch someone else's video and then try to draw the object and see if that was what, like how close it was to actually what they were thinking about when creating the phrase.
Thank you for sharing. And we have our last group with AG, Aina, Barbara, and Victoria. If one of you wants to come forward.
Yeah, hello everyone. So we were talking, I will present the objects that we had. We had a blackboard, a plant, wait a minute, I forgot. What did I have? Yeah, a mocha pot. And then what else? A plant and a watch, a wrist watch. And we were talking about the representations that each objects were making. And also we were talking about like there was a question which arose as well, like if we should also explore the representation, like what the object represents. For example, let's say that the watch is also like represents the time. So if we should also internally, like someone mentioned the philosophy behind it as well. some of the objects carry that question within themselves. So naturally, I think that there was like a question that arose from that. And we were also talking about how we choose the object according to our comfort zone. So for example, I was mentioning that I would probably not choose something that is like a blackboard, which is very linear. So naturally my body likes to like turn and do circles or something like this, or curvy movement. So I also chose Mocha because it has a little bit of linearity. So I was like, okay, I'm going to step a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but also keep something that is easier for me, let's say. So like, I think, I don't know if anyone agrees that it's a like very clever move, let's say, sometimes, you know, to keep it a little bit simpler for the body. And we were talking how this task, especially the first one, generates a specific frame for us to improvise, basically, and not to be overwhelmed by the ideas. I think that's what we were talking about. And also we were talking and mentioned the limited space in our spaces where we inhabit. So yeah, that's also the limitation for the tasks that we have. Yeah.
Thank you, Barbara. This was the last group, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move on, but I think as the group, with all those little comments that you made, we can agree that movement became more specific, more framed, more articulated. Depending on the object, some qualities were changing. As you said, some of them were in motion, so then there was more attack, more dynamic, or some of them were very plain and linear, so there was more like a precision or edges described on space. But we would all say like space was a condition, and then movement was specific, articulated, framed in time and space. So this is something that more or less we're all agreeing. Let's go into the next question. We're actually going to throw two questions in one, and we will give you a little bit more of time. So the next questions, Alberto is going to paste them on the little, how it's called, chat, and I'm going to read them. So the questions will be, did you notice any change to your movement qualities from task 1 to task 2? I know that some of you already mentioned them, but we're going to mix you up again and put you in different groups, and you will have to talk a little bit about it again. And does the same sensation from previous tasks, so task number 1, remained when performing the task into a traveling phrase? Did you face any problems in task number 2? I keep on going with the questions. How the focus changes from task number 1 to task number 2. Did you notice a change from having a concrete image of the object to an abstract sensation that occurs to the dancer's mind to maintain the sensation of the concrete object? If so, explain. So read it, take a minute just to read it before we divide you in groups, in case you have any question. I know that some of you mentioned some of those questions already in your previous answers from question number 1, but let's give it another thought with different people around. We will make sure that Joanna goes with someone that speaks Spanish. So Joanna, if you end up in a group that no one speaks Spanish, no worries, we will redirect you into a group with Spanish people. And then we will not say all the names of each group. So please make sure that you remember in which group you were, and just make sure that at the beginning of the meeting, the first thing you do is just say, okay, I will take notes, I will be the leader, I will be the person writing down the things we talk about. So then when we say, okay, let's go group number 1, it will be a little bit faster. And one more thing, maybe to introduce yourself, just say name, location, and relation with movement that you have. So this way it's a little bit faster too. And we can get more time into discussing the quite many questions that we have to discuss. Alberto, anything else?
This time we're gonna give you, what do you say, Sara, 10 or 15 minutes?
I think 15 is fine. 15, 20.
Okay, so we'll give you 15 minutes again. Yeah, because these are 2 questions in one. So I'm going to reassign the groups now, so you meet different people.
Before
okay?
we go, there's any question or anything you would like to comment before we move on to the second task? No? We're okay?
No? All right.
I was just reflecting on the last person that explained, like the group.
Yes, yes.
In the choice of the object. Like I didn't thought about it, but like for me, it also had an emotional attachment. Like I thought a long time about which object to choose, but like I couldn't choose just a random object. So I had to really make a choice also in the choosing. That's
okay, yeah, that's great. That's great. I think it's really interesting what you just said. And also like in group number, I was not planning to say this, but in group number 9, I don't remember who it was, but they said, maybe it was Agnes. They said that the object also was affecting their movement, but not just because the shape of the object, but also because the weight of the object, the texture, the way different maybe like materials had when they were in contact with this object. So I think it's really, really interesting that all of you or some of you really went into detail with the object you were working and how the space around was affecting that object. So that's really good. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing your comment. Okay, so should we go in the new groups, Alberto?
Yeah, I'm ready to start. Sorry, I was listening to you, Sarah, and then I started to think about when someone was sharing the thing about the donut, which is that was nice. All right, I'm gonna start the room now. Is it working? Uh-oh. 1 second. All right, let's just go right into it, just so we don't run out of time. Starting with room 1, which was Andrea, Gabrielle, Katarina, and Maria. Whoever wants to share.
Yes, that's me. I think we all noticed kind of a big change between the first task and the second task in terms of the focus and the sensation. Yeah, the kind of what stays throughout the 2 tasks is the sensation and the energy of the object, but in the first task, we all were very focused on the shape of the object and on the object itself, and then we all kind of let go of that a bit more in the second task and like played a bit more with the qualities and went into more the like a flowy dancing quality. Yeah, some struggles that some of us had while transforming the sequence was that if the first task was kind of made to be on a fixated point in space, then it was hard to transform it into something traveling. And we also talked about how that depends on what object we chose, because some of them are really convenient to transform, and then some of them are like very static. Yeah, we also just talked about like, for example, time constraints that can kind of affect the way the different tasks are approached. Like if we don't have a lot of time, then the first task takes a lot of time, and then we kind of had to rush into the second task. And also, yeah, for example, me, I did the task in my room and then I went to the studio to record it, which also changed the qualities a lot because I was in a different space. Yeah, I think that's it.
Thank you for sharing. And now let's go to room 2 with Ina, India, Monia, and Stella. Sorry if I mispronounced them.
Okay, I was writing down the ideas. And for India, for example, she visualized a round circular table that it can open
in the space. So at the beginning, she was more static in the first task, and in the second, she moved it and opened the object. So she opened to space, and her feelings was so different, like she was growing in an abstract way, like the object. So kind of she was the object also. And she used her eyes like a laser, kind of something like this. And she tried to keep it also in the second task. And she said it was difficult, but also it helped her to find this sensation of space. And for Ina, in the second task, she was more fluid and rhythmical, and she was drawing the parts of the object in different parts of space, like taking apart the object like a disintegration, but every piece was clear in the space. And for Monia, it was difficult to make it clear for who is watching, because from the moment she was moving the object in the space, it was difficult to keep it clear in her mind. So maybe also in the people watching. For me, for example, the most important thing that changed was the visualization of the object, because at the beginning I was visualizing it in front of me all the time. And then I start to visualize on the side, on the floor, and also small and then big. So my movement changed from tiny and precise to dynamic, more dynamic in space. And the focus also. And changed my idea, my abstract idea, because it was a lamp, and it became the sense of light. So like I was holding something warm in my hands, and it was also very like philosophical sensation, like hope, like soul in my hands. I don't know, something magic. Okay, I think I said all.
Thank you for sharing. All right, now we're going to go into room 3, which is with Ale and Joe.
Yes. Well, we found a lot of similarities between us in the activity. We go even more fluid at the second task, and also organic, like we feel the change of weight more clearly. At the first task, it was more like a rigid movement, like, yeah. Like it feels like to be very exquisite with the movement, the second task. And about the focus, like I think we were more in the like a first layer. No, we were concentrated in the translation of the movement, and we lost the focus of the image. No, yeah, we just also because we didn't have like enough time to finish the task 2. It was like rush, so the image of the concrete image of the object was lost, but it was focused on only in the translation, see, and kind of the resume.
Interesting, thank you. And now we're going to go into room 4, which is with Shara, Emilia, and that was just you two.
Okay, so I will explain the notes, and One of us was injured, so we only had 2 dancers describing this task. So I'll start from Gara. She actually found it a bit difficult, the first task, because she was more used to improvising with like empty head, like not to be so precise and describing an object. She had a triangle without the base. And when she started to explore the movements, very linear movements, that was also a bit challenging for her because she's more used to like fluid and circular movements. But then when she started to approach it from a different perspective, like as a slide and how you can use the triangle, it was a little bit easier. And the second task was a bit easier for her performing wise, and she felt less mentally heavy and with a better sensation. And it was actually interesting because myself, I had a quite opposite feelings. I found the first task very easy because it was in a good way limiting me. Like I had an object in front of me and I was like just curiously describing and touching and pushing, and like without thinking too much, I knew how to move around the object. And the second one, I had also very like box shaped objects, so which I'm used to like doing sharp and linear movements, but I wanted to get rid of this quality in the second task, and I found it very difficult to make it more fluid and circular because of the object. So I didn't really move it from A to B, but it was like coming with me, around me in different sides. And I found it more mentally demanding because I was so focused on going from one corner to another than like kind of empty-minded, take the phrase to the movement. And yes, I think that's it.
Nice, thanks for sharing. All right, now we're gonna go into room 5, which is with Barbara, Francisca, Jonathan, and Sarah.
Okay, so we had different ideas and interpretations. Jonathan, for example, in the first task felt stiff and limited, and in the second task felt like the movement had an aim, a purpose. And then, for example, Barbara said she hadn't enough space, so she incorporated the second task in the first. And so we talked about space, and it emerged that sometimes having a bigger space can be less boring because you have a lot of possibilities. So it could be better for a dancer to have more space. But if you have a small space, you can think about exploring different qualities. Or Barbara said she explored more levels, so up and down instead of spreading horizontally. And I think that I hadn't thought about this principle. Well, going up and down, moving vertically instead of horizontally, which is space as well, but it's not so so easy. And then we said that the path is more important than the shape of the object. This emerged because we were thinking a lot. For example, I speak for myself. I was thinking a lot about the object, the shape, and describing it. but the path, the movement you make is as important as the description of the object. So it wasn't easy to go from a shape to another, because the things there is inside from one shape to another is maybe more important than the shape per se. And the last question we hadn't enough time to talk about, but we said that we all of us mixed a concrete image with abstract image. So it was fluid. It wasn't a description, a direct description, an objective description, but it was more of sensations and what we felt about the object. So that's it.
Nice, thank you for sharing. Now we have room 6, which is with Agnes, Giovanna, Greta, and Rosella.
All right, we discussed a few things. First, Rosella talked about Rudolf Laban and Laban movement regarding to space, use of time and quality of movement. She referred mainly to precise movements. She told us about the different experience of imitating a movement or creating movement. Then Agnes talked about constructing movement and sequences. In the first task, having the object present, she felt that she had to think about the dance, and then on the second task, she could play with the sequence or the creation he had made on the first place. That the object was an excuse, and then the second part she could play more. Then Giovanna said that she had to talked about this construction and creation also as well, and she said that she thought about on the two tasks about something geometrical, only about the shape, the form, and not an object itself. And this was a nice discussion about the fact that in the end, all objects have a geometrical shape or form. And then for me, I have the difference between task 1 and 2. I felt the second was movements were faster, and the focus change was about constructing on the first place, and then in the first task, and then deconstructing, like we talked about in Spanish, desarmar, romper el movimiento. That was the feeling in Spanish. And for me, the experience was abstract all the time. I didn't feel the first task was concrete, but abstract as well. And then we discussed about the use of space, and a nice experience Agnes shared us about the object she chose. I don't know, how do you say in English? The object when you put pepper. So we kind of share of different movements with feelings and smelling and textures with pepper. That's it.
Nice. All right, we're going into room 7. Antita, Jenny, Mercy, and Tushar.
Hi. So for us, I think the one thing that we all agreed on was the fact that the movement was much more much more fluid the moment it moved from task 1 to task 2. And that's something that was more natural than to start with, task 1, where we have to contain whatever we have to do and be a lot more precise. So, but the good thing was that everybody felt that when we went from task 1 to task 2, it became a lot more easy and the movement came a lot more naturally. So to start with, Jenny said that it was an interesting task for her because she could discover how the movement changed in space and how she felt that her body was more free while she was dancing because she was dancing in a much bigger space. And it was also a special task for her because she usually dances with the feeling of the body than just with the brain, because it becomes a lot more mechanical. And so it was an interesting exercise for her as it helped her discover different movement styles and different movement types rather. For Mercy said that task 2 gave her more creativity in terms of movement than task 1. And the movement became more rounded for her. And the focus shifted from task 1, where she was primarily, her movement was more dominant with her legs. And it moved to her arms later when she moved to task 2, where she could direct her choreography or her phrase with her arms more than what she was doing when she was doing task 1. For Ankita said that it was easier while transitioning from one point to another, because the goal was to utilize as much space as possible, which came naturally to her than staying in one place and moving. And since she already had the structure that she had developed in task 1, it was easy for her to maintain it and then shift her focus towards directing her energy into utilizing the space around her in a much better way. And yeah, so lastly, for me, it was an amazing task, both 1 and 2, because I could experience the contrast between containing and expanding the energy that helped me create the movement in the first place. And also while doing task 2, the fluidity between 2 different movements came more naturally than when I had to contain it in a certain space, which I believe added more depth to the phrase that I had created with the same mental energy that I had put into task 1. Also, while transitioning, while moving from task 1 to task 2, I felt that I had to utilize a different approach towards what I was doing. And while experimenting, I experienced that it was very similar to there's a art form called continuous line contour drawing, where you don't lift the tip of the pen off the paper, and whatever it is that you have to do, you have to continuously make it while using the same line. So I felt that I had to use an approach which was similar to that in the second part, instead of having pauses or breaks between 2 different types of movements. So if I went from one movement to another, I had to find that balance between not giving a pause in between the phrase, basically. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
Nice. Thank you for sharing. Very interesting. All right, now we're gonna go into room 8 with Bernard, Lucia, Rosa, and Sarah.
Hi. Well, I was the leader, or I was in charge to take notes. So we kind of agreed that on the first task, we experienced like more static, concrete movement. And when moving to the second task, it became more fluid. For Lucia, it was exactly this: static, concrete, and articulate to fluid, grounded, and more improvised, less concrete. On the second question for her, she was focusing more on traveling as as well as some of the other group members, and she found out that the object remained in her body, let's say like in her arms. She was experiencing the object in a different way, and it was really clear, like she was feeling it in her arms, to whereas in space or outside her body. And she was really focusing on where she was going and evoking the object more like inside the movement she was doing. For Bernard, he was on the first task. He was like, his movement was kind of hard and really grounded, and it changed. It became more fluid when he was traveling in space. He felt like the grounded quality changed and became fluid. But when he was he would also found that the movement became a bit chunky at the end, and it wasn't as fluid when traveling in space. Like it was for him, it became solid. For Sarah, yeah, Sarah didn't have that much time to talk. She only had like 60 seconds, so it would be nice if we could all kind of hear a bit more about her. But for her, it was the first time. For her, it was really helpful to have something like really concrete to move or to create movement. And in contrast with me, it was just like kind of, I felt really limited. But yeah, it was like this different. Like for me, it was just very, very limited. I was really in my mind, and I couldn't really let go of that. Like, and Sarah, like she found out that she gave up on her quality movement, like the qualities that she's actually more comfortable with or more common for her when she was traveling in space. So yeah.
Nice, thank you for
Sarah,
sharing.
would you like to add something to what Rosa said?
Yeah, I didn't. I had like the last minute appeared on the screen that it was over. So then when I started speaking, yeah, the thing like for me was a bit different from what I'm hearing, because the second task was more limiting in a certain way. Like I didn't find myself going more fluid, but I was even more concrete and more sharp. And I had to make a choice, like to give up the experience of the consistency or texture of the object in order to really stay with the task of traveling. So I had to like choose which thing to give the priority to. And yeah, that's the thing that made me lose a bit of the quality I found in the first task. And the only problem, it was to adapt the a static movement to the dynamic of the traveling. So I had to change a bit of the sequence, the original sequence, in order to stay with the task. And the direction were not a problem, because I already, like in the first task, I already had different levels and focusing like on, I don't know, the front and then facing the back. So that was not the problem, but maybe the thing is that I had in mind a front. Like for me, someone was looking from a point like in front of me, but that was not a limit for me. Like it was not like I had to face all the time to the person looking. And yeah, the abstract, like the second task, the more abstract like movement was less free for me in the creation. Like it was like the spacing, like moving from A to B was a constriction. But maybe like now that I'm hearing the other people, maybe I just had to really follow the already existing pattern. Like I didn't have to travel from A to B, but maybe just like make another way of traveling, like just finding a more natural traveling sequence. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Let's go with group 9.
Yes, thank you, Shada. Group 9, we had Asha, Brianne, Crystal, Amelia, and Stephanie.
Yeah, so we discussed a lot of the similar changes from the first task to the second task. So I won't repeat what other people had said. But out of the 5 people in our group, 3 found it, the first task, a lot easier because of the freedom of it and the creativity, that there wasn't so much of an implement to like trying to move it right away, or it was more open-ended. So you got to pick a subject and it wasn't necessarily like, okay, now move it, as opposed to I found the second task easier because I knew that was the final like end result. You had the first task where you knew you were going to have to expand upon it. And then there was one person who thought they were both at the same challenge. So that was kind of our statistics on that. We had the question of you either had the question of time, like the amount of time you had in a studio. So would you spend a lot of the time creating the first phrase, or would you spend the time moving it? And then the space. So if you weren't at a studio, if you were at home, the first task may be more simple or maybe easier to create because you only are limited to the space. But then once you have to travel it, you're having the question of, okay, what space can I use? And then we asked the question during our discussion, like if you actually didn't know that there was going to be the second task, would that have changed the difficulty or the challenge or the focus of how much time you put onto it? So knowing that we had to expand on the first phrase, that made me feel comfortable kind of throwing it together easier. And then the second phrase, the second phrase, it being easier, as opposed to some other people in my group thought, knowing that it was going to expand the first phrase was easier to create. So yeah, kind of the question of the task. And yeah, I think that was it, trying to keep it concise.
Nice. Thanks, Brianne. All right, now we have room 10, which is Christina, Fausto, Clara, and Natalie.
Hello, so I was the one in charge of writing the notes. So what we were mentioning is, first, Christiana mentioned that she didn't feel changes in the focus, both of them kind of like Christiana and Fausto, because Natalie, she didn't have time to talk, so I will try to be fast and so she can explain a little bit her experience. So the change between one task and the other, both of them mentioned that the difficult part was to make it travel, and the problems of each were the first. So Christiana said it was difficult to make the first movements travel in space. And then Fausto said that he had problems also with the space itself because he bumped into the objects and stuff. So the solution to the space problem was something that I also had to do a little bit because it was not like a regular studio space, to instead of moving from one point to the other, to move the way you could, just move more in space in general. And then about the focus change and the feeling, they both mentioned that it may have changed a little bit on how you do it, but they both kept the focus on the object and try to still have the feeling of the object. And whether for me, in the other side was different, because the first task, I thought more about the object and how it would move, the texture, blah, blah, blah. And then in the second part, I used the movements I created from that, but I forgot about the object and try to make it travel. And I would only go back to the object if I didn't know how to keep on going, or if I didn't know how to make it travel. So maybe then I would go like back to the first to keep on going to help me. But it was also, like most of the people said, easier for me, not like in my, like for the people in my group, it was the opposite, easier the first, maybe because of the space. But yeah, for me it was easier the second one because I forgot more about the object and it was more like, I don't know, moving. Now I will let Natalie explain a little bit about her experience.
For me, there were quite similar sensations, but because my first task already moved around the space a bit, because that's how I like to dance. So then moving it onto more of a diagonal line made it feel a bit more linear. And I think because I'm in my living room, there's not a lot of space to travel across. I think maybe if I'd had more room, that would have changed it a bit more. And then for the focus, for the first task, I was focused more on if I was the object, whereas when it came to the second one, it was more I was taking the object with me across the space.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we have our final group, which is with Aina, Yaisa, and Chung.
Yeah. We kind of briefly talk about what we did for task 1, and we spent quite a long time in task 2. And for all of us, if I understand correctly, there are changes in the movement qualities, but given that the focus of each individual can be different. Like for some, it might be more accepting that things change, while for some, it can be really trying to keep the base, and we also talk about space as well. And one of them said she likes traveling, that's how she danced. When she danced, she really liked traveling. But when she did this task, she didn't have the dance studio that day, so she needs to do it in her living room. And her body is really asking her to travel, but because of the space, and it makes her wonder what it could be if she had the space, like what's might be possible, what other possibilities there could be if she had the space. And I'd add to it, and I thought sometimes when we've got limitations that we have to work with, and that's maybe when we surprise ourselves and like get new things, because with everything we have everything, but when we have to work with limitations, and sometimes that's what brings new things, if I am making sense, and for the third one, we didn't really have much time to talk about it, but I was saying like you start from a shape, but then when you stick with the task for a while, then some new things might come. Like for example, an umbrella, that it has a curved shape, and then it has a very thin stick, and then maybe you're trying to move with the idea of its shape, but then it maybe an imagery popped to your head. Oh, maybe this umbrella is now in a storm, then the umbrella itself is also moving. Then how your body now is not just about the shape of the umbrella, but also this shape moving itself in the space, and your body is trying to portray that movement as well. Yeah.
Thank you all for sharing. Because we're running short on time, I'm just going to ask the last question in general. Did you find these tasks beneficial to your movement or training? And whoever wants to speak out on that, you're welcome to.
Well, I can say just something quickly. I found it beneficial because first of all, I don't have a lot of experience with improvising, etc. Or when I create choreography, even I don't have a specific structure in mind. And this time it was kind of a different, thinking about it in a different way when I created task 1. And for task 2, that also kind of benefited me, I think, because I danced a lot of, especially during the last year, I danced a lot in my living room with limited space. And then now thinking about having to move from A to B, that was kind of a challenge because I usually also, especially now, always stay kind of on the same spot. And yeah, it was nice, a nice challenge task too.
Thank you. Any other person that wants to share?
Yeah. I would say that it was quite beneficial for me because it's always good to have a starting point to go from. In general, whenever it's improvisation or creating in general with your body and in your image. But I thought it was especially interesting because the whole task, everyone's had such different experience on how to approach it. And some people chose very simple objects. Some people chose more complex or more detailed with textures or non-textures or just a simple line. So I feel like it's interesting to not only hear everybody's experience, but to force, especially myself, to twist and turn the idea of what the task actually is and develop a new understanding of how to create movement. And it's a really good starting point because it can develop into so many different areas of movement. So yeah, I thought it was really beneficial.
Thank you, Jonathan. Maybe one last person would like to share something else. If not, we would like to, no one else? Okay, so let's go all to the chat and we can open, I'm gonna paste, yeah, Alberto just pasted 2 links and we are gonna share them with you. Maybe what we can do, Alberto, so maybe we can paste like the 4 links that we chose. So you can paste to Shai and then Saramitola and Clara and the other girl you chose. And this is something that we are gonna leave for you to observe. Since we talked about some of your objects, we thought it would be nice to share some of you. At least at the end of this class, we wanted to maybe like watch them together or something, but since we are running late, maybe it's nicer that we give you the links and you take the time whenever you have it, if it's today or tomorrow, to watch some of them and maybe share your impressions. One person that just left asked if maybe it would be nice to have each other's links so we can all watch each other and learn a little bit more about each other through movement, which we thought it's a very nice idea. We will share with Eva, and if she agrees, maybe we can ask you, and if you all agree, maybe we can share the links of the people that agrees to be shared. But definitely, I think it's nice that we keep on sharing it with each other. Any other thing you would like to ask? You would like to add any questions that the first module of the program maybe was not clear, or you would like us to tell? I mean, Eva will watch the session online, but maybe something that it was really important for you to be like talked about or questioned. No, everything was clear? Yes.
No, yes, for me, I had this thing that is still lingering in my mind. As the videos I sent was very rough, very first videos that I took while doing the tasks, because I felt I wasn't sure if I was being loyal to the scientific rigor of the investigation, of the research, to just send the first approach to the movement. But then talking with the dancers, everybody took their time and edit and, you know, reshape and change movements. So what of these 2 options is what you're looking for right now?
I mean, we can check with Eva and she can send you all an email to be more precise with the answer. But I think at the moment, it also depends a little bit on the situation you have, if you have a lot of time. But honestly, I would say, like, don't change it 25 times or refine the movement. so you like it better, or so it feels like, you know, because these words came from some of you, like, yeah, I was not in my head anymore, and I was actually quite precise with the object and with the shape of this, or with the texture of this. And I think all those first instincts that we get when we are doing the tasks are the real ones. Then we put layers, and but I will write it down, and I will make sure that Eva answers that, because I think it's very interesting. Although it came out through some of the impressions of different groups, like, yeah, it was not in my mind anymore. So when you're not in your mind anymore, it means that you're instinctive, and that's where the whole like neuroscientific movement research like makes sense. If that helps you, Cristal.
Yeah, I will send you more questions in the private.
Okay, also, if you have any questions, please like make sure that you forward them to us, even if they are more scientific. We can CC in Eva, and she will be in contact with you answering like anything, or she can answer all of them in the next session. So please don't be like shy asking questions. Like all this is like an exchange from Eva to you and from you to Eva.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and one more thing, if you can all, like, just to finish off this week, just write a small reflection on everything you experienced. Doesn't have to be long, and then send it to your mentor, and we will forward those to Eva, just so we have that.
More can be 2 phrases. It doesn't have to be like 2,000 words. Like.
I want to add something, if I can.
Yes, Rosela.
I made a mess with the first task, so sorry for not understanding. But today the Zoom meeting helped me a lot to get into the task, and inspired my curiosity and surely the way I'll search for my object. So thanks to everyone.
Yeah, Rosela, I think I sent you an email yesterday, right? So
yeah.
So I think it's really good, as you say, that it really helped you the meeting. And I think with the few links that we are sharing with all of you, we try to choose like very different ones, some people in bigger spaces, some people in smaller spaces. I think also you can get an idea of how people is doing, and I think all the words that people share and the different approaches that people had will help you very much. But please make sure that you do email if you have any other question, or you feel like you need to talk about something.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So besides that, everyone is okay with what we were talking today and how the discussions were happening. So the second module, it's already online. You can start working on it. If you have any questions, again, let us know, and we will be here to help. And we look forward to see you next week on Saturday. Okay, Alberto, do you want to add something?
No, just I want to thank everyone for joining in, and it's nice to see everyone's faces.
Yeah, and know a little bit more from all your backgrounds, which is really, really nice. I think it makes it very special, this internship, because we are all from different backgrounds, different nationalities, different cultures. So it's a big, big exchange, not just in the approach of movement, but also in the approach of observation and perception. Okay, so if no one wants to add anything else, I guess we're done. Have a super nice Saturday, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, gracias.
You guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice weekend.